Okay, hello everybody. My name is Matthias Buehler and I was invited to have a quick presentation at this event with the topic Fictional Mapping, the Joy of Making Up Geography. Sadly, I'm not able to attend myself as I have another, due to the time difference and having another presentation just a couple of hours later. I cannot join you guys directly in New York, but I propose to send in a video with with my presentation instead. So thank you so much to Piali, Patrick and Jim from Esri for actually giving me the opportunity to do this presentation. I'm personally doing 3D graphics for since a long time. So I basically started with 3D graphics about in 1992, and I've been experimenting a lot with different 3D technologies. And my specialty, I would say, is 3D environments, natural and urban. So what we are looking at here is a rendering I made a couple of years back with a 3D environment that is completely populated with trees. So this is not a photograph. This is an actual rendering. I'm also doing more and more, or have been doing more and more over the last couple of years, urban environments, like fictional ones especially. And the image that we are looking at here is one of the images that is basically the result of one of the training DVDs I did in past. This one here was produced for the Gnomon workshop in Hollywood. So this is a 7 hours training DVD for students that want to do procedural environments using City Engine for use in high-end visualizations and film set. So just very quickly about myself. I said my name is Matthias Buehler. My background is in architecture. And after my studies, I worked a little bit in landscape architecture, a little bit in architectural visualization. But then in 2009, got the opportunity to work in the City Engine development team in Switzerland. And so 2011, the company called Procedural that originally developed City Engine was acquired by Esri. So altogether, I was part of the team for about 5 years, pretty much 5 years. And I did a lot of tutorials and free content like the Facade Library, work on the medieval town or the desert city example that looks something like this, that are actually freely available still with City Engine. And I did a lot of tech supports. I was for about 3.5 years. I was the City Engine tech support lead, did a lot of forum support, and helped with general product engineering like testing and so on. But then I just decided to switch from the development side to the actual user side to help people with actual projects in City Engine, whether this is for architects or planners or city planners, or for people that want to do virtual reality demos or games or film and so on. So basically I switched to becoming a consultant. I started that for a year in the UK. During that time I did also the Gnomon workshop DVD, which I mentioned as an instructor for the Gnomon workshop. And then I got the opportunity to work on a film, did that at Scanline Visual Effects in Canada, or as a environment developer lead. And about 2 years back from now, I founded my own company called Urban, and I've been doing this, or a lot of 3D work and fictional worlds and real world planning now under the umbrella of Urban, together with my co-workers. Little detail, we are also an official Esri partner, and we even won our first award this spring. It's the Partner Conference Award, and the category that we actually won was creating realistic context, and it was of course a big honor to actually receive this award directly from Jack Dangermond himself, as we see here. Sweet, so let's quickly talk about the ArcGIS platform and why we are using it. So of course everybody knows it has a lot of different components, like the desktop component like Pro or ArcGIS or ArcMap. It has many different extensions. It has a cloud component like the ArcGIS Online. It's actually supporting more and more things like mobile devices and artificial intelligence and so on. There's tools that are coming up now that are getting a lot of traction, like ArcGIS Indoor, ArcGIS Urban, for example, as a administration tool, you could almost say, for zoning codes and for public participation, and of course City Engine. So ArcGIS Urban and City Engine, they will actually be working together very closely with different export file formats or like the geodatabase, or for example feature services, and so on and so on. So it's definitely a cross-platform platform, and we are using quite a lot of those components while developing our fictional 3D worlds. We will see some examples afterwards. So what is City Engine? City Engine is a procedural modeling application. Now, procedural means that you have a procedure, or in this case, the rule, that is basically a script. And we can apply this script to a polygon feature, to the so-called shape. Then once we generate this, or once we generate the 3D model, we have the 3D representation that represents, for example, this building footprint and the architectural semantics that are encoded in the rule. And so if you do this on an entire feature class, for example, or multiple feature classes with multiple rule sets, what you wind up with is a 3D city representation. Now, we also have our own tool that we are licensing for master planning. So in this case here, you see it's actually working in City Engine. So it's like an add-in for Esri City Engine. And you can use it for very precise urban planning and it works also in multiple scenarios, and you get the full statistics out of your design, like the GFA value, FAR value, and number of buildings, and so on, and a lot of other key metrics. But not necessarily we only need to use City Engine for real-world planning, as in this case here, but we can use it also to do other things. So in general, to combine everything just mentioned before regarding the ArcGIS platform and GIS and planning tools, so what we can do is we can leverage GIS in the creation of fictional worlds. So we can use, for example, GIS data as an inspiration for fictional cities or environments. And what we are typically doing is we are starting with GIS data as a starting point for a realistic context, and especially for the scale, so that you have a realistic terrain. You can use this using a DTM, then a satellite picture on top, some real-world footprints, which could, for example, also come from OSM data or from city administrations. And then we can use analysis tools in ArcGIS and processing tools to actually prepare the data. So let's dive in our first example, which is a completely fictional world, and this is called the Favela. So what we are seeing here is a completely fictional creation of this Brazilian shantytown. it is inspired by reality. So we have hundreds and hundreds of different types types of buildings that we are distributing here. We have complete digital vegetation. We have cables that are hanging from buildings to buildings for electricity, and so on and so on. Now we took the digital model of this and we scaled it down to the scale of 1 to 500, and we created this completely fictional interior also. So this is not a photograph, this is a three-dimensional representation also of the interior space, where, and the story goes like this, so that there are fictional hobbyists actually working on this physical model, and you see that it's not even yet completed. So there's some scissors here, and like this brush, and a couple of buildings that are supposed to be put in their location. But again, to basically show your preview that it's a digital representation, we have this wireframe representation here, and some early volumetric studies to see how dense the different areas are depending on the slope of the terrain. We also have a facade library that is used to create many different variations of buildings. And we also have things like, for example, the distribution of very typical assets that can be distributed on either on the floor or on the sidewalk or on the rooftops of those buildings. Here again, another wireframe representation, this time of the interior space. You see there's all sorts of things we've created, like pencil holders and I don't know, ashtray and the chairs and the light, and so on and so on. Now, the images we've seen before were created using rendering technologies, or rendering a specific render engine actually called Maxwell Render that produces very realistic representations or light simulations actually. And just this year we had the opportunity to provide the Favela dataset for a showcase that was done between Esri and Epic, so the makers of the Unreal game engine, to actually showcase a new exporter for the Datasmith exporter. And Urban was basically part of this because we provided the Favela dataset to showcase the technology. Now there's also on unrealengine.com there's a blog post about this, so you can have you can read the story there. But there's also a video that I quickly wanted to show you that is embedded in this blog. So let's have a look. Okay, let's move on to the next one. Pseudo-fictional world. Cities for Independence Day Resurgence. So this was during my last job at Scanline Visual Effects in Vancouver, Canada. So let's have a look on what we did. So the story is in the movie that actually there's a huge alien mothership coming and landing on Earth, and the mothership has an enormous gravity by itself. So when landing, the gravity is actually so strong that it rips up parts of the Earth's crust. So what I was actually responsible with, or for for parts of this movie, was the creation of the procedural environments that were populating the thousands and thousands of background buildings that were actually placed on these flying city junks here in the background. And in another shot in the movie, what we are seeing here, so I'm not going to talk about the left part here because that was manually created, but rather talk about this part here. So this entire part of the city was created procedurally using City Engine and that workflow that we had created at Scanline Visual Effects. And actually the environment also extends to the other side of the camera for about the same distance, and it is about 30 square miles. So it's a huge area and actually very, very dense. You see the buildings are ultra dense because this is an alternative future for Washington DC, because it was in the prequel of the movie, it was destroyed 20 years ago and large portions were actually rebuilt in that time. So as you see, it's inspired by reality, or inspired by real world GIS data, but is actually a completely fictional environment. So one of the instruments that we developed was the so-called turntable that we have refined in many, many different iterations to come up with different approaches for creating residential areas, more, let's say, office areas, or let's say business districts, vegetations, parks, and so on. So this was the default template test that we used for developing all the elements, like including reflectivity values, traffic densities, and so on and so on. And the last example that I wanted to show is a realistic world that uses actual GIS data. And so this is a real world or a realistic world with fictional elements. So we have 3D Istanbul for the kids cartoon in the movie Kralsak here. And for the creation of this city model, we worked together with the Turkish Esri distributor. Okay, so let's have a look at a short video.
Sizler de şehrin kaosundan, gürültüsünden, tıpışıklığından bıkmadınız mı? Şehir hayatı zaten zor. Bir de uyuz Tanju'nun bağırmasıyla, çağırmasıyla uğraşmayın. Huzurlu bir çevrede, yemyeşil alanlar içinde, güvenli bir sitede yaşamak sizin de hakkınız. Hem de portala 5 dakika yürüme mesafesinde. Evet, yanlış duymadınız. Tüm şehri yavaş yavaş pikselli hale getiren ve donduran o güzel maviş portal hemen yanı başınızda. Siz de doğru olanı yapın ve Gülleci Paşa konutlarına gelin. Gülleci Paşa konutları sizlere hayatın tüm renklerini ve şehrin dinamizmini bir arada sunuyor. 4. etap evleri satışa sunuldu. Gülleci Paşa konutları tam 1400 konutla tam 1350 konutla hizmetinizde. Gülleci Paşa konutları, paşalar gibi yaşamak isteyenlere.
Okay, let's have a look at the quick making of. So we received from the Esri distributor the terrain, so the DTM basically. We also received some GIS data, like for the building footprints and for the street locations. So we went in and cleaned that data a little bit. And then we added, or we actually projected the GIS data on top of the terrain and developed the rules which create the thousands and thousands of 3D buildings as individual geometries. Then we were actually given a couple of landmark buildings, like the bridge, or for example this very famous mosque here, which we have added to the 3D scene. Here's another view, so we added a couple more different elements like these little boats here, and power lines, and so on and so on. And another view here. So yeah, thank you so much for having me. And you have seen a couple of things that we are doing for the creation of fictional environments using GIS data, or completely starting without some. We are doing also other things like virtual reality demonstrations, and we have also started with augmented reality demos. And if there are any questions regarding the content of what we have just shown in this presentation, or if there are questions about the reference projects that you can see on our website, please feel free to go ahead and contact us. Thank you so much, and have a great rest of the event.